Alright YouTube, it's time for Occult video number 40, I believe, actually. The big 4-0. On the topic of the second death and sort of things associated with this. My feelings on it are a little bit different because I've got the paganistic beliefs and then sort of delving into things like theosophy and Eastern religion, and I sort of fuse them together in my own beliefs. But I'm going to try to cover first the topic of what the second death actually means. When a person kicks the bucket and begins decomposing, biologically speaking, we say that they've died. In many traditions, many people believe that after this physical death, when your body has bloated and decomposed and it's nothing more than a skeleton, or you've burned the body, or you know, just lies in a ditch and ferments somewhere. I find these things slightly funny, decomposition that is. When you die biologically, then there's an afterlife, reincarnation, something like that occurs. I've said before, I do believe in reincarnation of a sort. Not exactly the same as what an Eastern practicing Buddhist might believe in reincarnation, but I still believe in the general concept that there's a continuance, and I don't believe in an afterlife strictly speaking, not the sort of unchanging static, you're there for eternity afterlife of the Christians, Muslims, or Jews. The concept of the second death is that the person has passed out of remembrance, that is, that nobody in the world, no living thing remembers them, and at that point they've died. A second time, they no longer exist in any form within the physical world because nobody remembers them. There's nothing to hold them to the physical world, so to speak. They've experienced the second death. I think we can arrange the sort of individuals, if we look at some of the left-hand path traditions, some of the teachings there, certainly certain paganistic philosophies, we can see sort of the same general overarching theme. There are variations upon this theme. The essential idea is that if a person is worthy of remembrance, if a person has shown themselves worthy, and the way in which you do this differs from culture to culture and time period to time period. If you fall into that category, you become exempt from the concept of the second death. In sort of the Norse, or I suppose you would say Northern European pagan tradition, of course, if you may not be yourself a particularly well-known, skilled individual, but you go into battle, slay your foes, you get killed in battle and sort of die holding your sword, you die in battle, that qualifies you as being virtuous enough to avoid this sort of tormenting fate after you've died. In some pagan traditions, I believe it's the Aztec tradition, but I'm not exactly sure. In some traditions, everybody eventually, over the span of time, succumbs to sort of non-existence. They sort of devolve into a spiritual form upon physical death, linger in some state or another, eventually all passes away. If you look, though, at the most authentic pagan traditions, the reincarnation cycle, while ongoing in some forms, or a temporary afterlife state, you would think of going to Valhalla or something like that. After a very long time, an entire age has passed, everybody essentially comes back into physical form, again, in some form or another. Some way, everything is recycled, everything is retained continuously, it changes form. If you look at Tolkien's lore, based as it is on Icelandic sagas, what happens after the final, and I'm not talking, oh, Sauron's defeated, I'm talking the final battle, Morgoth comes back and everyone is fighting and everything, you know, falls to shit. A new age begins, an entirely new existence is literally, in the case of Tolkien's lore, it's sung into existence. All of those same old forces alluded to in some of the prophecies that he penned are woken up, and this is actually fairly close to the authentic concept of Scandinavian paganism that he's basing his works on. It's surprising how authentic some parts of this are. If you read like the Silmarillion and some of these other materials, that's what happens. After Ragnarok, all these old forces, they have been slain, they've been destroyed, they're no longer there, but after a time they do return. Forms may change, ways may change, the names may change, the places change, the planet that's being inhabited changes, but everything basically falls back into some level of tangible physical existence. Everything comes back. That's the sort of concept I believe in. I don't believe in reincarnation, by the way, that we simply bounce around randomly forever and all of these individual discrete existences eventually succumb, decay, and die, because I apply that same cycle to those same existences. If I believe that the human soul, or the human spirit, or our intelligence, our cognition or something, has some unique quality to it that allows it to persist, I have to believe that these various realms, these various existences, including the fictional ones that somewhere must actually exist, literally word for word as they've been talked about, that they persist in some form as well. These ages obviously last a lot longer than a human lifetime. Many human generations have existed on this one planet. This planet eventually will be excoriated. It will get subsumed by the sun, smashed into by an asteroid large enough to literally crush it. And life on this planet will end. Will that sort of concept of existence end along with it? No. I would also like to discuss a topic of being sort of spiritually enslaved, because it goes along with the second death. There's another fate that people should, if they're practicing occultism, they should seek to avoid. The highest idea is to become sort of a deity, not necessarily in the most literal sense. You know, you come down back to Earth after death in a flash of lightning and you're like, haha, now Earth is mine. I'm taking command because now I'm a god. Not like that, becoming, spiritually speaking, a sort of deity. The highest goal, because I don't believe in nirvana, I don't believe in liberating yourself from existence. I think that's a different type of suffering. I think of that as more similar to hell, really, than some sort of paradise. I don't exactly know why people would want to experience such a thing. I think the theosophical concept of Devachan, some of the Vedic lore, that believes in liberation, but it's a temporary liberation, sort of a period of rest. I think that's superior to the Buddhist ethos, to the Buddhist ideology of sort of this eternal rest, this eternal non-dual state. I don't think of that as a good thing. I think of that as a bad thing that, again, people should probably avoid. I embraced it for a while, then I forsook it. I said, actually, this sounds like greater suffering than living in a physical realm. The highest ideal is to become deified, and then you can do this through your actions, by creating thought forms in an occult sense. You have to sort of dwell upon the concept of yourself as already being deified, and you have to be able to manifest that mentally while you're still alive, and then it transfers, it imprints upon your next existence or your time in the astral realm or Devachan, however you would like to term it, whatever your specific views on it are. Your mentality has to be able to cope. Your mentality has to be able to fundamentally transform itself. Thus, an even worse fate than the second death is to be fundamentally tied to somebody who is deified and to become, essentially, spiritually speaking, their slave. I can think of no better example, no better way to illustrate it than the interplay between Charles Manson and Vincent Bugliosi. Vincent Bugliosi won the case. Manson's in prison. He'll be in prison until he dies. Bugliosi won and wrote a very good selling, bestseller book, made millions and millions of dollars and had everything that he wanted. But now he's dead. Now, 100 years from now, will anybody have a Vincent Bugliosi fan club and talk about his life and times? No. Will anybody discuss the intricate details of Vincent Bugliosi's life? No. but they will be for Charles Manson, because even though most people think he's crazy and completely off the hinges, he is well known. He has styled himself in such a way, you could apply the occult to this, that he has become deified. Now, he's not, completely in control of the things that people will say about him or think about him. A lot of people still think that he's a hippie shaman with magical powers or some satanic cult leader. But he will persist nonetheless in these various forms, and these forms are many. Some people literally think of him as a sort of environmental activist messiah or a Nazi messiah trying to liberate the white man, Native American sort of shaman of some sort. Not, necessarily reality, but he has become like that. Anytime Vincent Bugliosi is mentioned 100 years from now, it'll just be in the context of this other, more powerful individual. He didn't even need to win his case. In fact, losing the case and having this book written that basically talks about how he's pure evil has made him a sort of god. He's still alive, and yet he's already achieved this. He doesn't have to worry about any sort of second death because he'll never pass out of human remembrance until the end of the world. There are figures where we don't even necessarily know who the actual flesh and blood human being is at the center of the story, who have achieved the same thing. Jack the Ripper. We don't even know who Jack the Ripper was. And yet this figure, whoever it was, has achieved the same state. We don't even know their name, but they're still in remembrance, if only for, a series of very gruesome slayings. And so serial killers very often fall into this strange category where they will not pass out of remembrance, that is, that their thought form remains completely intact. Many people remember who they are. There are probably hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people who are obsessed with this topic, keeping these individuals well after their death completely alive. J.R. Holmes and all of these other people, John Wayne Gacy, Ed Gein, Richard Ramirez, and so forth. They're still, spiritually speaking, alive and well in this world. Although, their physical body in many cases is already a corpse, but they're still alive spiritually. But they're not really in control of what people actually believe about them. It's not like somebody like Alexander the Great or George Washington or Napoleon Bonaparte. You have historical records, in many cases very clear, largely accurate accounts of what's being done. You have the statues and you have the books and scrolls and so forth. Now, with a person who has gained infamy rather than fame, in a sense accepted by the culture that they happen to be part of, in the case of infamy, there's a lack of control over their legacy, but the legacy is still there. I would say that would be subjugated to the former. A person would have a better outcome, spiritually speaking, I would assume, if they are accepted, or the other part is they're not necessarily accepted, but they later come to be accepted as right for what they've done. A person who may be seen as a villain in their own time period may not be seen as a villain thereafter. And you can also have someone who's considered heroic at the time. Hitler was considered very heroic by the German people in the Third Reich. Thereafter, of course, people mainly talk about the Holocaust, and so his legacy, what remained, is largely negative now. It's considered negative by most people in the West. You go to India or someplace like that, and they find him more amusing. There's a Turkish comedy, apparently, which all it is Hitler doing crazy stuff. And I saw a clip. It's in Turkish. I don't understand what's being said, but it looked pretty funny to me. I think it was Hitler as a school teacher or something. There were like these Japanese schoolgirls or something. They were watching Hitler as a teacher. I don't even know what was going on. But yeah, that's the basic concept. There are multiple things that can happen when you die. I believe that the cycle of reincarnation that applies to something that's capable of thinking also applies to the general concept of a realm of existence itself. That is, a whole universe around us, our physical, mundane existence, what we witness around us, the cosmos, the celestial bodies. Eventually, it's going to fall into entropy. It's going to get fucked up. Maybe there'll be another Big Bang so-called, or Big Crush and then another explosion, or whatever happens, or dark matter belches forth another universe or whatever. This realm will be unstable. It will no longer have life as we know it within it. That doesn't mean that the realm of existence that we experience ourselves collectively necessarily goes anywhere. That's what I believe. And again, one of the main concepts within the left-hand path is self-deification. That is, you're trying not to be forgotten, basically, after you die. It's setting up in the same way that the ancient pagans, they made statues of themselves. They had pictures of themselves made. They had elaborate tombs and records and all of these things. The same way that they were trying to go about securing some level of legacy for after they were rotting in the ground or mummified or whatever, is the same general goal that many people practice today within the occult. The difference is, of course, the average occultist does not have control of a nation, and thus they don't have tens of thousands of laborers to work on an elaborate pyramid tomb for themselves or something like that. They don't have access to that, so what do? They make themselves memorable in some other manner. When I write books and my name happens to be upon them and people consume them and they get distributed across the world, that's a way of avoiding the second death. When I put my likeness on YouTube, after I die, the YouTube channel will presumably still be there if YouTube exists when I die. People will still be watching my image, hearing my voice. In fact, that's a more tangible record, really, than, you know, a statue or something like that. It doesn't move. It's not a perfect likeness. This more or less is. That gets rid of the concept of the second death. To influence others in some way, for good or for evil, or for no real purpose whatsoever, to have some sort of sway over others, to be in their minds while you are still alive, that's a way of defeating the second death. You have self-deified yourself in a manner to be capable of affecting others' emotions, of affecting others' thoughts, in whatever way you happen to be doing so. It's the same thing. Really, it moves you towards deification and away from this becoming nothing when you die. And if a person wants to become as nothing, if they want to unexist, I don't know, maybe they have the right to do so. It doesn't sound great to me, but each to their own, I suppose. So yeah, Occult Video 40, the second death, and some concepts associated with it. That's about all. Peace out.